8,336 meters down, a light switches on in water that has never seen one. Beyond the beam, nothing. Pressure here is roughly a car balanced on a patch of skin the size of your fingernail, pressing everywhere at once, and something swims into the frame. Not a shadow with teeth, not a monster. A pale, palm-sized thing that looks like a tadpole someone drained the colour out of, drifting over the sediment like it belongs there. It does. The ocean keeps going for another 2.5 kilometres. This animal will not follow it. Look at that again, and tell me what you expected. Whatever it was, it probably had teeth. That is what the deep sea has trained us to imagine. Black water, a mouthful of needles, an eye the size of a dinner plate. So when a team finally filmed the deepest fish ever recorded, the payoff should have been a nightmare. Instead, they got this. Something about the length of your hand, skin thin enough that you can see the shape of things moving underneath it. No scales, no armour, no glow. It hovers just above the mud, tail flicking, and if you found it in a rock pool, you would not look at it twice. It is a snailfish, genus Pseudoliparis, and the species still has no name. It was filmed in September 2022 in the Izu-Ogasawara Trench, south of Japan, by a joint team from the University of Western Australia and the Tokyo University of Marine Science and Technology, and the footage went public in April 2023. Depth, 8,336 meters. Put that somewhere your body can feel it. Almost every mountain on Earth is shorter than that. Stand this fish's home next to a peak, and the peak vanishes before you reach the bottom of the video. And the animal at that depth, the one holding the most extreme vertebrate record on the planet, is soft, pale, and slightly cute. That is the first clue. Down there, the terrifying thing is never the animal, and it gets less impressive before it gets more impressive, because snailfish are not some exotic deep-sea family. They are everywhere. There are snailfish in cold, shallow water off Alaska. There are snailfish you could find at low tide, sitting in a puddle, stuck to a rock, with a modified sucker on the belly. Several hundred species spread across just about every depth the ocean has on offer. The family that produced the deepest fish on Earth is a family you could pick up on a beach. That is not an accident. And by the end of this, you will know exactly why a soft, unremarkable, generalist little fish turned out to be the only shape that could go where nothing else could. Start with what should kill it. At 8,336 meters, the water is pushing with something like 830 times the pressure you're sitting in right now. Close to a ton on every square centimetre of its body, not from one direction. From all of them, without a break, for the animal's entire life. Now here is the part almost nobody gets right. Pressure does not crush flesh. Pressure crushes gas. You are mostly water, 60% of you, give or take. If you could get down there without freezing or drowning, the water in your muscles and your blood would barely notice the squeeze, because water refuses to compress in any way that matters. What would end you is the air, your lungs, your sinuses, the pockets behind your eardrums. Every bubble you carry is a hole waiting to be closed. Squeeze water and almost nothing happens, because water barely compresses. Squeeze a bubble and it collapses. That is why a styrofoam cup strapped to a deep-sea lander comes back the size of a thimble, and it is why most fish physically cannot go deep. Most fish carry a gas-filled swim bladder, a little balloon that keeps them neutrally buoyant. Take that balloon down 8 kilometers, and it becomes a liability with a countdown on it. The snailfish solved that by throwing the balloon away. No swim bladder, no scales, a skeleton that is barely mineralized, with a skull that does not fully close, muscle and tissue loaded with water, wrapped in loose gelatinous flesh. There is no air anywhere in the body, so there is nothing for the ocean to squeeze. The pressure goes straight through it like it is not there. Its armour is the fact that it has none. That is a beautiful trick, and it costs the animal almost everything else. Without a swim bladder, it has no easy buoyancy control, so it stays close to the bottom and swims like it is in no particular hurry, because it can't be. Its body is tuned to a pressure that would kill you instantly, and when you bring it up, the tuning fails. Specimens hauled to the surface arrive as something soft and ruined, a shape that used to be a fish. It does not endure the trench, it requires the trench, so the body problem is solved. Good. Except the body was never the real problem. Go smaller. Go inside a single cell. Every living thing runs on proteins that only work if they're folded into precise shapes, and pressure attacks those shapes directly. At 8 kilometers down, water gets forced into the folds of the molecules themselves. Enzymes stop fitting the things they are supposed to grab. Membranes stiffen. The chemistry that keeps you alive starts failing at a scale where having no air pockets does not help you at all. You can equalize a body. You cannot equalize a molecule. So the ocean cheated. Deep-sea fish flood their tissues with a compound called trimethylamine N-oxide, TMAO, and it behaves like a chemical splint. It props proteins open against the squeeze. Measure it across species and you find something almost suspiciously neat. TMAO levels rise with depth, more or less in step with the pressure. Shallow fish carry a little. Fish from 4 or 5 kilometers carry several times more. Hadal snailfish are loaded with it. And here is where the story gets slightly ridiculous, because you already know this molecule. TMAO is the reason fish smells like fish. That sharp, unmistakable, old seafood smell is what happens when this compound breaks down. The deepest vertebrate ever filmed is held together, structurally, chemically, at the level of its own proteins, by the smell of a fish market. Remember that. It is about to become the most important thing in this entire story. Because every solution the ocean hands out is a loan, and this one has a hard repayment date. Loading a body with TMAO makes the inside of that body more concentrated. Salt, solutes, everything. A shallow fish sits at roughly 350 milliosmoles per kilogram inside, while the seawater around it sits near 1 to 100. That difference is not trivia. It is the entire basis of how a marine fish manages water. It is hypoosmotic, saltier outside than in, and its whole plumbing is built around that direction of flow. Now push it deeper. More pressure, more TMAO, higher internal concentration. The gap narrows and narrows. Run the line out, and the two numbers meet at around 8,200 meters. At that depth, the fish's insides are chemically the same as the ocean. Go past it, and the arrow flips. The fish becomes more concentrated than the sea. Water starts pulling inward instead of leaking out. And every organ built to bail water out is suddenly doing the wrong job in the wrong direction. Not slightly wrong, backwards. Different estimates put the wall somewhere between roughly 8,200 and 8,400 meters, and no fish has ever been documented below it, anywhere on Earth. Think about what that actually means. There is a floor down there. It just is not the sea floor. And this is the part that still gets me. That number was not measured after somebody filmed the record. It was calculated before. In 2014, a team led by physiologist Paul Yancey published the TMAO limit after catching hadal snailfish at 7,000 meters in the Kermadec Trench and running the chemistry. The prediction was blunt. The deepest fish in the world should live just under 8,200 to 8,400 meters, and it should be a snailfish, and you will not find one deeper no matter where you look. That is a scientist drawing a line on a map of the planet and saying, nothing with a spine gets past here. So Alan Jamieson's team went to check. 10 years of trench work, baited landers dropped into the Japan, Izu-Ogasawara and Ryukyu trenches, cameras falling for hours through black water to sit on the bottom and wait. The Izu-Ogasawara was the smart bet because its deep water runs slightly warmer than the Mariana Trench, and a fraction of a degree buys metabolic room down there. They got 836 meters. The old record, set in the Mariana Trench in 2070, was 8,178. They beat it by 158 meters, which sounds small until you realize the theory says there are only a few dozen meters left in the entire ocean. Days later, traps set at 8,022 meters came up with 2 snailfish inside, identified as Pseudoliparis belyaevi. Nobody had ever physically caught a fish below 8 kilometers before. Before that expedition, nobody had seen a single fish in the Izu-Ogasawara Trench at all. They did not stumble onto the deepest fish alive. They predicted where the edge of vertebrate life should be, sailed to it, and pulled it out of the dark. And then the footage handed them something nobody ordered. The fish at 8,336 meters was a juvenile, a baby. Sit with that for a second, because it breaks the intuition completely. The deepest, most punishing, most physiologically expensive address on the planet, and the animal occupying it is the youngest, smallest, least experienced version of its species. Everything about the way we talk about extreme environments says the opposite. The bottom should belong to the veterans. It doesn't. Across these trenches, researchers keep seeing the same uncomfortable pattern. The smallest individuals turn up at the extreme end, while the larger adults cluster a little higher up the slope. Nobody can say for certain why, and the honest answer is that this is still a working hypothesis rather than a settled fact. But the leading idea is simple, and once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. The deepest band of the trench may be the safest room in the ocean. Everything that could eat a juvenile snailfish, everything that could outcompete it for food, everything bigger and faster and hungrier is upslope. Higher up, the trench has other fish in it. Lower down, past a certain depth, the competition simply runs out of chemistry and stops. So the smallest, most vulnerable stage of the animal sits in the one place on Earth where nothing with a backbone can follow it. It is not surviving down there despite the pressure. It may be hiding behind it, and that is a nursery with terms attached. To be safe, you have to live at the exact chemical edge of what a vertebrate can be, with the wall maybe 60 meters below your belly, in a place where a meal is not guaranteed to arrive this week. Picture the trade. On one side, no predators, no competition, nothing bigger than you in any direction. On the other, a body running at the absolute limit of its own chemistry, in permanent dark at temperatures barely above freezing, in the single least forgiving address, in the biosphere. That is the deal, and something that small takes it, generation after generation, because the alternative is worse, which leaves one question sitting there, and it is the one that turns this whole story inside out. Safe from what? We are talking about the bottom of a trench 8 kilometers down, the place everyone assumes is close to empty. Cold, black, starved, dead. If that were true, there would be nothing to hide from, and no reason for anything to be down there at all. It isn't true, not even slightly. The bottom of a trench is not a grave, it is a drain. And drains collect. Starts with what the fish is actually doing down there, because it is not looking around. There is no sunlight at 836 meters. None. Not a photon of it, not filtered, not faint. And this animal's eyes are reduced small, and by the standards of the fish you know, close to useless. Which sounds like a tragedy, until you notice it is not hunting anything you would need eyes to find. Run your finger along the side of a fish and you cross the lateral line. A row of tiny sensors that read movement in water. Snailfish have that, plus an unusually developed set of paws across the head, wired to pick up faint pressure changes in the water around them. Add a sense of smell, built for a world where food is a chemical rumour, and you get an animal navigating by things you have no organ for. It is not blind down there. It is reading a version of the world you have never had access to. Currents bending around a rock. The twitch of something small, a body length away, a scent trail, thinning out across the mud. Hold on to that, because it is also the animal's only real weakness, and we used it. Now the bigger correction, the one that rearranges the whole picture. Everyone assumes the deepest point of the ocean must be the emptiest, because it is furthest from the sunlight that powers everything. Longest fall, most scavengers on the way down, least left at the bottom. Logical. Wrong. Look at the shape of a trench. It is a V, kilometers deep, with steep walls. Anything sinking through the water column, dead plankton, fish carcasses, fecal pellets, wood, whatever falls, does not land evenly. It hits the slopes and works downhill. Earthquakes shake the walls and dump sediment into the axis. Currents sweep along the flanks and deliver more. Everything ends up in the crease at the bottom, which means the deepest scrape of a trench can hold more organic material than the flat abyssal plain on either side of it. The lowest point in the region is not the poorest patch. It can be the richest one for hundreds of kilometers. Jameson's team came back from the Japanese trenches saying more or less the same thing. The bottom was not barren, it was crowded with amphipods, small scavenging crustaceans, some no bigger than your thumbnail, that arrive at anything dead in numbers that look like static on the video. They have expandable guts and enzymes that let them chew material almost nothing else can process. In the hadal zone, they are the currency. Everything that lives is either eating them or eating what they are eating. So the deepest vertebrate on Earth is not a monster at the end of the food chain. It is a shrimp eater. A hand-sized, soft-bodied predator sitting on top of a world made almost entirely of scavenging crustaceans, sucking them out of the sediment one at a time. The record-breaking animal, the one that pushed a whole lineage to its chemical limit, was built by the smallest things in the trench. There is one more detail about these fish that does not fit the monster frame at all, and it is the one that made me stop and reread it. Researchers who have dissected hadal snailfish have described unusually large eggs for a fish that size, close to a centimetre across, and not very many of them. Think about what that means down there. In shallow water, the standard fish strategy is volume. Release thousands of tiny eggs, let the current take them, accept that almost all of them will be eaten, and win on numbers. That does not work in a trench. There is no plankton bloom to drift into, no sunlit nursery to grow up in, and nowhere to go but the mud you're already standing on. So the strategy inverts. Fewer eggs, bigger eggs, each one packed with enough yolk that whatever hatches comes out, already capable, already deep, already home. No gamble on the current, everything loaded into a small number of chances. The deepest vertebrate on Earth reproduces like something that cannot afford to lose, and that swarm is exactly how we got the footage. This is where the story gets uncomfortable. A deep-sea lander is a metal frame with lights, cameras, ballast weights, and one more thing that does not get mentioned in the headlines. Bait. Usually mackerel. You drop it over the side, it falls for hours, it settles on the bottom, and it starts leaking a smell into the water. Amphipods find it, then more, then thousands. Then the snailfish shows up, because the snailfish follows the amphipods, because the amphipods followed our fish. That famous shot, the deepest vertebrate ever recorded, drifting over the sediment at 8,336 meters, is not a window into the deep sea behaving normally. It is a dinner bell we rang from a ship 8 kilometers above its head, and the animal came when it was called. Which means something strange and slightly embarrassing is true. We have essentially never watched this fish live an ordinary hour. Almost everything we know about it is what it does when a human being drops food in front of it. Whatever it is doing right now, and it is doing something right now, we have never seen it. Here is the next thing the footage does not show you. That fish cannot leave. Trenches look like they should connect. On a map, they are long scars in the seafloor, sometimes running for thousands of kilometers. But between one trench and the next, there is always shallower, warmer water, and for an animal chemically tuned to 800 atmospheres and near freezing dark, that shallow water is a wall it cannot cross. Nothing in its biology packs for the trip, so hadal snailfish do not spread. They speciate in place. The Mariana Trench has its own. The Kermadec Trench has its own. The trenches around Japan turned out to have theirs, undescribed and unrecorded, until a lander went down and found them. They are islands, and the islands are upside down. Now go back to chapter 1 and look at the softness again. The missing swim bladder, the loose gelatinous body, the barely mineralized skeleton. In the first half of this story, that was genius, a body that beat the ocean by refusing to fight it. It is also the exact reason this animal is stuck. It gave up everything that made it a general-purpose fish to become a specialist in one ditch, and the specialization does not have a reverse gear. Genetic work on hadal snailfish points the same direction. Researchers have flagged changes in genes tied to bone development and DNA repair, and losses in vision-related genes, which reads like a receipt. To get down there, the lineage paid, and the payments were not refundable. Which brings us back to the funnel, because a drain does not sort what goes into it. In 2017, a team sampled amphipods from between roughly 7,000 and 2,500 meters in the Mariana and Kermadec trenches, ran the fatty tissue through a lab, and found industrial pollutants in every single sample. PCBs, flame retardants, compounds mostly banned decades ago in the 1970s and 1980s that stopped being manufactured before most of the people reading this were born. In some of the Mariana animals, the contamination was compared to crustaceans living in one of the most polluted river systems in China. 10 kilometers down, in a trench nobody has ever fished, nobody lives near, and almost nobody has visited. The chemicals did not swim there. They did what everything else does. They stuck to sinking particles, they fell for years, they hit the slopes, and they slid into the crease at the bottom, where the amphipods ate them, and the animals above the amphipods ate the amphipods. The same funnel that concentrates the food concentrates everything else, and there is no exit at the bottom of a trench. That is the whole point of a trench. A plastic bag has been photographed near 10,198 meters. Mercury builds up in trench sediment faster than it does on the open deep sea floor. And notice the timing, because that is the part that stings. Those chemicals were banned before anybody had a camera capable of reaching the bottom of the Izu-Ogasawara Trench. They were falling through that water for 40 years while the animals down there were still officially undiscovered. We contaminated a place we had not found yet, using products most people threw away without a thought, and the receipt showed up in the fat of a 2-centimeter crustacean 7 miles down. So when the cameras finally reached the deepest fish alive in 2022, they were not filming an untouched world. They were filming an animal standing in the collection tray. The pollution got there first, and it got there decades earlier, quietly, without anyone deciding to send it. And then there is the last piece, which is the strangest of all. Below that fish, the ocean does not stop. Challenger Deep, in the Mariana Trench, bottoms out near 10,135 meters. Between the snailfish and the true floor of the planet, there are still around 2.5 kilometers of water, roughly the deepest quarter of the ocean, and no fish has ever been found in any of it. That is not because we have not looked. We have dropped landers, run baited cameras for days, and put human beings in submersibles on the bottom of Challenger Deep more than once. We know what lives there. Amphipods still swarming, sea cucumbers moving across the sediment, xenophyophorus, single cells the size of your fist, sitting in the mud, like something that got the scale wrong. Notice what they all have in common. Not one of them has our problem. Their internal chemistry already matches the seawater around them, and always did. So they never had to run the TMAO trade in the first place, and they never hit the wall that comes attached to it. They solve pressure with different molecules and a much older body plan, and the ocean simply lets them through. Picture the line for a second. Not a trench wall, not a cliff, nothing you could film. Just a depth, somewhere around 8.5 kilometers, where the chemistry stops working for one specific kind of animal. Above it, fish. Below it, no fish forever, in every ocean on the planet, and everything else carries on like the line was never there. That fish market molecule, the one that lets a vertebrate go deep at all, is also the thing that stops us. It buys you 8 kilometers, and then it refuses to sell any more. So this is not a gap in exploration. It is a gap in what a backbone can do. Humans have physically stood in a machine at the deepest point on Earth. A fish still cannot get there. Our entire lineage, every animal with a spine, from a hummingbird to a blue whale to you, is locked out of the last quarter of our own ocean by a chemical technicality, and a hand-sized pale juvenile in the Izu-Ogasawara Trench is as close to the door as any of us have ever been. Go back to the beam one more time. Same light, same sediment, same small translucent fish drifting through the frame, unhurried, tail moving in that slow lazy flick, looking for shrimp that came because we brought a dead mackerel 8 kilometers into the dark. It is not a monster. It never was. It is a soft, patient, contaminated little animal, sitting at the exact edge of what a spine can survive, in a trench that has been quietly collecting our chemistry since before anyone knew the trench had anything in it at all. It does not know it holds a record. It does not know there is a line a few dozen meters beneath its belly that nothing with a backbone has ever crossed. Then the lights cut. The lander drops its weights and starts the long climb back toward the surface, and the water closes over the place where it was. And below that, the ocean keeps going down without us.